Welcome to Drinking Bros, presented by GhostBed.com. Welcome to Drinking Bros, kids. D'Anthony, we got Sean Stone on the show today. That is a name that I couldn't screw up, finally.
I think it's pronounced Scion Stone.
Is it Scion? I was going to say
Stoney.
I got a Scion
Yeah, he fucks up everybody's names. That's the joke.
That's the running joke on this show. And, you know, obviously with yours, you have a famous parents in Hollywood. You're Sharon Stone's son, right? Is that correct? No, I'm kidding.
I've heard that before.
Have you really?
Oh, sure.
That's funny, man. I didn't know because she always seems like a partier. I don't know if she has kids. Does she?
Good question. I don't know. I played basketball with her when I was like 10 years old.
Did you dunk on her?
Did you dunk on her?
When I was 10 years old, I did not dunk on her, no.
What if that was your one thing in life? Like if people are like, well, what's something interesting that's happened to you? Well, when I was 10, I dunked on Sharon Stone. Like, I'm sorry, excuse me?
Yeah. No. I dunked on Sharon Stone.
You're a 10-year-old. You're a 10-year-old that can dunk, first of all, and secondly, you've dunked on an actress that has an Academy Award. Why the fuck was she playing basketball in the first place? That'd be weird. No, it's Oliver Stone's child.
It's Oliver Stone's son, actor, filmmaker. You got a new docu-series out. Real quick, though, I want to talk about your background during the COVID times we live in. Everybody's got an interesting background. Yours is very John Lennon-esque there. There's a lot of whites, and you got the beard and everything else.
Yeah, but he's not going to take a 6-month nap to protest Vietnam.
Well, you might.
You did it, John.
Thanks,
did it, buddy. What a fucking turd. I hate the Beatles, by the way.
He's a Beatles hater. I'm not. I like the Beatles.
I fucking hate them.
But I see some boxes in the background. Are you moving right now?
We are moving in. Yes, this is a process. It's like someone joked. They were like, "It's like funny farm." You're waiting for the moving truck because the moving truck is nowhere near here. So
yeah, exactly.
We'll see.
Exactly. Was it coming from California? Is that where you're moving from?
Yeah. From Cali to Florida. It's a long trip.
Can't blame you there, though.
I can't blame you. Yeah. What was your last straw there? Because we got out of there as well.
The last straw. Well, what they just did today. I mean, look, not just today, but they're pushing this vaccine mandate thing really hard. We kind of knew that was coming, and overall, just, you know, in between the taxations, the Democrat rigging, controlling politics there, just not a fan of it.
Yeah, no, I understand. You guys just went through an election with Gavin Newsom out there.
Right.
I don't,
selection.
Yeah.
Don't call it an election. It's called a selection.
A selection.
We used to call it.
We can call it a selection there. Did you vote in that? And did you vote for Larry Elder? I
would have. I don't think I ever got my ballot. Someone else probably took my vote.
Is that
knowing
true?
How the system works. Yeah, I mean, look, these things are it's so filthy. The selection process of voting and whatnot. I honestly haven't been excited about politics until the last few years, where I felt like, oh, okay, we have some interesting, authentic voices, that are coming in and, starting with Trump, that were challenging the system. But we always knew that the systems were, election systems were rigged. Remember Cynthia McKinney? She was a black congresswoman from Georgia, I believe. Or was it Georgia? But she's really cool. She was she was opposed to the whole, Bush Cheney war faction, and she was questioning 9/11. Basically saying it was an inside job, and they rigged it against her to lose, because it's an insider's game. Really at that level.
Well, let me ask you this, because we've had other, guests on the show who have claimed that the election is rigged. How so, and how are they doing it? Because Dan and I side on the fact of, I haven't seen anything in court yet. And by the way, I am a Republican, so I'm saying this from shit. I wish Trump was still in there, but I have not seen anything in court. Therefore, it is hard for me to go on air every day and tell everybody that the election is rigged. Do I have my suspicions? Of course I do. But until I see something in court where I'm like, all right, that was definitely the smoking gun of all of this, I really don't know what else to say at this point. Is it digital? When you say the word rigged, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, the process has changed over time. Don't forget. I mean, politics has always been about rigging elections. If you want power enough, you're going to cheat. You know, they talk about sports. You know, if you ain't cheating, you're not trying. You ever heard that expression in sports?
Yeah,
that's sports. Okay, that's not life and death. That's not the money involved in politics. So people are cheating in sports because there's money to be made in sports. Guess what? In politics, that's even more power. That's even more influence. So you can. How do you say? You can bet anything in your life that there's cheating going on, and that's been since the very beginning. Going back to like Tammany Hall, getting immigrants drunk and saying, you know, hey, you want a free beer? You know, vote for the Democrat. I mean, that's old school rigging, right? Then you got the Kennedy versus Nixon rigging, where it's like, you know, the mafia was digging up dead bodies in Illinois and Texas to give it to Kennedy. I think it worked out okay. I mean, ultimately Kennedy died partly as a result of you know, him betraying the mafia, you could say. But the point is that it's not a new thing to say elections are rigged or that vote fraud occurs. What happened, I think, more recently, and the Democrats were screaming about it until 2020, was the whole, as you said, electronic voting that goes on. How once you start going to electronics, as you know, you open up to the internet, you open up to all kinds of hacking. It's very easy to flip votes. As I understood, with the Dominion voting machines, what they would do is they would basically create algorithms such that it would be like if you had one vote for Biden, it would count as like 1.15 of a vote. And if you had to vote for Trump, it would count as 0.85. Now, if you had 10 votes like that, it'd be very obvious. Once you start getting to 100,000, it becomes harder to see that, right? And then, you know, what occurred on election night, we all watched. You don't shut down voting. I was awake in 2000 when Bush and Gore were going head to head, and Florida was like, they were counting till like 2 a.m. or something. You know, there was no stopping it. Oh, it's 11 o'clock. We're going to take a break now. Go find a few 100,000 ballots that just came in. Okay, if you're talking about voting early, those ballots have already been in, okay? They're not just arriving at midnight on the night of the election, right? And then all of a sudden, overnight, coming up with hundreds of thousands of votes to make sure that one party wins. And of course, in places like Atlanta, where they blended on a faulty water line, which was bullshit, to move the Republican overseers out. I mean, come on, this is just old. That's like, it's a mixture of old school rigging with new technologies. That's all. That's what you got.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: since you brought up Dominion, most of the people who have accused the election of being rigged, like Newsmax and these guys, are settling these lawsuits that Dominion has brought against them. If everybody knew, like you were saying right now, why would any of these corporations be settling, Fox News included, against Dominion if they know the same information?
Well, again, I don't know exactly how you prove some of these things. You see, it's the same. Okay, so how much evidence has been destroyed? How much is hidden from, if you have full disclosure? Like, I can't tell you in terms of a process of law, a legal process of lawsuits, how to actually prove. But the point is, why should a Fox or a Newsmax even have to settle? It's called news. If information is being circulated and allegations are made, you have every right in this country to report that.
Well,
you actually have obligations.
I would fall far short of calling anything that's happening on television news, right? I mean, that's a filtered process. But what you're saying is exactly why I think this conversation is a little inane at this point. Because if the premise that you're presenting is not falsifiable in some way, then you also can't prove it. So what's the point of even talking about it? I think the far greater risk is how we've accepted the fact that we're being lied to. It's not that people suspect that they're being lied to. It's that they know they're being lied to and they're still falling for the lie, right? They're falling for the lies on a daily basis that they're getting told, but also the big lie, which is that all of this is real, that our political system is real, that the news is real. It's all fucking bullshit. Yeah,
and to your point, in this Dominion lawsuit, since we're talking about it, to what Dan said, they went back and forth, and there's a discovery process and everything else. And Dominion asked Fox to prove their allegations. They asked Newsmax to prove their allegations, and they could not. Therefore, as you start to get further and further down a legal rabbit hole, I've been in a few of these things before, Then you look at your options and you're like, well, shit. Do we want to keep dragging this out for money and everything else? Because again, like I stated earlier, do I think am I suspicious about it? Absolutely. I just wish there was that one piece of evidence or that one thing that we could push forward and be like, that's it. That's what caused this. And congratulations, we got him. We don't have that. And to bring up an analogy you brought up earlier, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Again, as a Republican, I look at it like, great. If they did cheat and get away with it, we should have cheated better. And we did not. Because I think in 2000, with the election you mentioned between Bush and Gore, there was some suspicious things with that one judge who was like, nope, I'm all done counting. We're good here, and I'm going to go home.
Yeah, it kind of bounced
and called
back
it for Bush.
It bounced back and forth from Gore being in the lead to Bush being in the lead, and she just decided at one point when Bush was in the lead to call it off. Like,
Yes.
oh, we're done now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like it's like you're playing a game of fucking basketball with your buddy. You're playing one-on-one, and you just decide once you go up by one, all right, I'm done for the day. Like, oh, really? Are you? Bet you are.
We're going to 11. It's first to 11.
Yeah.
With you in particular, though, you brought up JFK and everything else.
JFK's not even the best example of a stolen election with the mob and shit. The best example is and our fans will love this. You can read in the book The Master Switch by Tim Wu, and it is how a man named Reed, I can't remember what his first name was, John Reed, R-E-I-D, was running back and forth from the New York Times to the Associated Press using Western Union to send messages. And they found out ahead of time that it looked like Rutherford B. Hayes was not going to win. But they poisoned the community, right? Mm-hmm. They used misinformation through these three companies: the Associated Press, the New York Times, and and Western Union, all three of which still exist and are considered reasonable American corporations right now, right? Mm-hmm. They wanted Rutherford B. Hayes to win because he was going to end Reconstruction in the South, which was repairing the South from years of slavery, getting black people back up to the standard of living that we wanted them to be, right? Just like everybody else. And they fucking crushed that shit, because they didn't want that happening in the South. That's all that shit happened about 140 years ago, 150 years ago, right? So about midway through the life of our country, right after the Civil War. That is a good example of how far people will go. So it is not outside the realm of possibility, because I think people are just as slimy today, if not even more so.
Oh, yeah,
just as power hungry as they've ever been.
Yes.
Of course they'll cheat to win shit, and you can see them doing it all the time. If you'll lie, you'll cheat.
Yes.
And they lie constantly. So that's for sure. But I don't know how much sense does it make for you then to focus on that problem that you've admitted yourself is unfalsifiable, right?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not focusing on the problem. I guess to your point, though, as far as like how corrupt the system is, listen, when you've got Biden's son with a laptop that the FBI had in his possession, right? Basically verifying this whole corrupt deal with Burisma, with the Ukrainian oil company, right? Where his dad literally in power, while he was vice president, put pressure on the president of the Ukraine to fire their prosecutor over there who was investigating, this company that his son is on the board of and making money from. And Biden, as the vice president of the United States, is saying we're going to withhold Ukrainian basically bailout money, billions and $1 billion loans until you put pressure. I mean, the fact is that's Biden, and this is pre-Trump. Then the Democrats turn around and then make it all about Trump making a phone call to say, hey, you guys should look into, Burisma and what happened there with Biden's son. And now Trump is the bad guy. You see how everything is inverted. And don't talk about the Republicans like they're the good guys. There's I would be like, listen, there are patriots, and there are lifelong politicos, and you get the Bush family, you get the Romneys, the Cheneys, the McCains. These people are politicos. They are deep state, New World Order agenda operatives. The Bush, Clinton families are so close. They're no different than each other. And that's why when people say, well, why didn't the Republicans stand behind Trump? The Republicans didn't like Trump. Like the real working class Republican Party of like, that would have liked a Lincoln, let's say, or, Ulysses S. Grant or a Patton, like these people would have liked Trump, but everything that the party became, right, it's a complete, can they say it's been co-opted essentially by the same factors that co-opted the Democrat, especially like, the left, let's say the extreme left that is now in power. Remember who the neocons are. The neocons are all former Marxists. They're all former Trotskyite, leftist revolutionaries, right? Who decided to create permanent warfare and join the Republican. But it's like you can't look at the name of the party to differentiate. You have to look at the ideology of the people and what they're about. Are they about globalization and the idea of increased corporate power at the expense of the nation state, which is what Trump stood with. And as a result, because he stood with the nation state and everything he said was politically and economically oriented towards empowering America, a lot of Republicans hated him, and a lot of Republicans were happy to see him.
Yeah, that's why I think it's people like to invoke the phrase "New World Order" a lot, and I guess I could see where you're coming from with that. I would. This is a genuine question for you. Do you think it's a coordinated cabal New World Order, or is it like every other aristocracy that's ever existed where those in power they're not just in support of their ideals or their political points, they're in support of the power hierarchy and structure itself. You know what I mean? So maybe for them, Democrat or Republican comes first, but the power, the political class that actually comes first. You know what I mean? So like,
that's right.
Brutus killed Julius Caesar, but he didn't start turning over power and giving Senate seats away to plebs. Well, I mean, Julius Caesar did that actually, but they don't. These people, these career politicians, they don't attack. That's why they don't like AOC either. She's a lunatic, by the way. But the reason
she's terrible.
Yeah, the reason they don't like her in the party is because of that. Because she challenges the establishment all the time, and that's what people like that do. I just don't think that George Bush and Dick Cheney got on the phone with somebody, or that Biden got on the phone with China or something like that and made a deal. I think all these people kind of know the deal. Like it's like a little wink. Like, hey, you can do this and you can do that, but hey, can you make sure Prince Andrew can't be found, because we don't want him in front of the cameras every single day with people talking about how he uses a doll of himself to fucking rape girls.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we don't want that stuff on the news because it makes all of our aristocracy look bad. I think that's what it is. I think it's like a little club with some, it's like baseball or something. They have a bunch of unwritten rules that you have to follow. Mm-hmm. Like if you're a famous person, you can do everything up to including this, but no farther.
Yeah.
And you can criticize other people in the group, but you can't criticize the group. You can't criticize aristocracy as it is, right? And you never see those guys doing that.
Right.
Bush's family, like Prescott Bush, from the late 19th century until right now, like since Rutherford B. Hayes was in office until right now, these people have been in power in this country. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts, man. And out of curiosity, I'm wondering if your father directing one of the most famous presidential movies of all time in JFK was kind of the bridge to your distrust in government and politics at all.
I think that's a good way to phrase it. By the way, you mentioned New World Order, and I actually wrote a book on the New World Order. It is a real ideology derived from the British Empire, and basically how they wanted to reconceive power in the 20th century.
Well, it was Elizabeth first, right? Didn't Queen Elizabeth start that by putting all of her fucking family members, like marrying them off to all the other European royals and shit back in the 19th century?
Well, no, you're talking about Victoria. Not Elizabeth.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me.
Elizabeth was a virgin.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Victoria, certainly there was the British certainly helped foment the First World War. They pawned it off on the Germans and made them pay that massive war debts. But ultimately, the British were the ones threatened by the British. I'm sorry, the British were threatened by the German Empire, right. The German expansion into Africa, and especially their naval fleet. So
your book goes into how maybe even just that momentum carried over into building the global aristocracy today, right? From
not just. Well, you have to remember that the global aristocracy began during the British are the most recent empire of world history, right? They had a quarter of the planet under their control. To this day, the Commonwealth countries are Australia, Canada, I guess South Africa, but essentially like the countries that are still very much to this day under the influence and thumb of British. And then obviously the Americans were the target of the British Empire since their great imperialist Cecil Rhodes said in his will, we need to reincorporate America, basically. And that's what they worked to do by first co-opting America into the First World War. We had no business in the First World War. But don't forget, JP Morgan began as a British bank. A lot of our financing came out of the city of London in terms of our development in the early years. So financially, we were very much interconnected. And that's why, you look at like the Boston Brahmins, the opium slave traffickers of the 19th century that became the Forbes families and the Perkins families and, all these different families that ultimately gave birth to became the economic powerhouses of the 19th century, the Rockefellers included, in that time period, are Anglophile. They were Anglophile ideologically, economically. And so what you've seen is essentially a co-optation of what is like the deep state being very much like the British, the way the British run their empire with sort of like these permanent bureaus and offices, right, that are not elected officials. That's really what it's about. People inside of the various, CIA, FBI, NSA, and deeper, right, other agencies no one even talks about. That's how you create a deep state operation. And so the idea of like this sort of globalized empire is what the New World Order is about. It's obviously shifted away from the word empire because it's sort of, it's considered chauvinistic. So they wanted to create something that was more about adapting, bringing in, Africans and Asians into the agenda and, having people like Obama being like, the attractive young black male, orator who's going to, help, save democracy, but ultimately is working toward the New World Order agenda, which is taking power. It's fundamentally, it's like there's many roads to it, but it's globalization of everything from law, finance, corporatism, right? Taking the power away from the nation state, away from what America was built upon, which is this notion of a government accountable to the people.
Right.
The more that the power is taken away into these international forums, the World Health Organization is going to mandate this. The you name it, the ICC is going to go after that. Is going to strip away your country's sovereignty. The World Bank is going to issue credit and loans and things like this. It's all designed to take away the notion of a national sovereignty, which has always been the enemy of empire. And that's why America is such a critical country in this whole battle that's now taking place. And Kennedy, in a sense, was a part of that because, not to say that he was perfect, but in many ways he was still a nationalist in the traditional sense. And he, for example, with Vietnam, like that's an imperial war. He was not in favor of going to war, in Vietnam because he recognized that's got to be, a Vietnamese war. If the Vietnamese want to fight, the South wants to fight the North, it's going to be their war. We shouldn't be committing, hundreds of thousands of Americans to go protect South Vietnam. Like that's a police action, right? But that's the whole point. We moved away after World War II from the notion of just fighting for national defense and sovereignty and security to this notion of the whole globe has to be secured for natural resources, right? And we have to go, overthrow this country or that.
Well, if that were true, we would be in China fighting right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the one country we can't be in fighting.
Yeah. No, what you're saying,
it's tough though.
This whole thing you're describing is what I would say is the natural siphoning upward of power from whatever lower level it happened to be at, whether it's at the individual person level and the government's trying to take it away, or it is the global power and it's trying to take it away from nation states across the country. And I don't say that to be dismissive or say that it's not notable or alarming, but rather to say we should have seen this coming because this is how power works. It's like you close your doors on the front of your fucking house to keep the fucking air conditioning inside or the heat if it's cold, right? That's that. Everybody knows that. And for some reason, every motherfucker that's ever come asking you for a vote, right? Whether it's in a local election or a federal election or from the UN or some other fucking bullshit organization globally, they're not asking for your vote. They're asking for your allegiance to their fucking cause, right? And they're willing to buy it if necessary or steal it if necessary. So they're all assholes. Why? I don't understand why we trust any institution ever. Like, it's not that you shouldn't use institutions. You should. But it's not what you expect that happens. It's what you inspect that happens. Unless we're allowed to, at the lowest possible level, fucking go through every single one of these decisions that are being made. How are you spending my money? We're taxing people. We're the richest country in the goddamn world. And we're taxing people at somewhere between 20 and 40%, and the government can't pay its bills. So then you don't deserve to be the guy. If it was a business, we would shut that motherfucker down. Yeah. Or somebody somewhere. If it was an IP, if it was a publicly traded company, the owners of those shares would show up and be like, what the fuck are you doing? We are the owners of all the shares of America. What the fuck are you guys doing with our money?
Yeah. And again, all the themes that we're discussing here, I hate to say this, go back to films that your father has done. When you were a child, you had to have grown up with all this. Money, Wall Street, Vietnam, Platoon, presidents, JFK, Nixon, directed all that.
Oliver Stone is a name that a bunch of people in D.C. don't like, I would imagine, right?
Yes.
Because he tells the truth.
Right.
And that's the problem. If you build an entire institution on a fib, it's like fucking Tinkerbell, right? It only holds it up if everybody believes that shit. But once everybody's like, oh, that's just some asshole in a suit.
Yeah.
And that's 300 other ones. Fuck these people.
Yeah.
Then it all crumbles. You know what I mean?
And the reason why I am bringing up your father in this is, that's how you were raised. And I'm sure you had access to some of this information at an early onset age rather than the traditional schooling where there had to have been conversations between
kids don't get paranoid until college usually.
Correct.
Right?
I mean, look, I'm saying this as a father of two sons as well. And I'm like, man, there's things that I would love to talk about with guests that, when I come home from work every day that I can't, or I don't know if I should.
That's funny.
Was it like that with you or was he like, you know what? Here's my view of the world at a younger age, and I want you to know it now on the way up because you're a pretty young guy to be this knowledgeable on this many subjects. For real, without somebody telling you, hey, dude, keep your eyes open because everything around you is false.
One way or another, I figured it out really quick. JFK was definitely an eye opener when you're 7 years old. And I was acting in the film, watching it and absorbing it at a young age. It definitely woke me up. But, I was still a kid, right? I wasn't too concerned by politics and whatnot. I think for me, a big eye opener was really the war in Kosovo, against Serbia and watching the media play exactly the typical role the media plays, which is prostitution. To sell the American people on this war and how Milosevic was the new Hitler. And it was all about saving these people and not showing at all, context, contrast, nuance, right? Letting all that just go by the wayside. And then later, reading about how the Kosovo Liberation Army was itself basically a front for the CIA and they were involved in all kinds of narcotics trafficking because Kosovo was a major port, I believe, for shipping heroin at the time. May have been coming from the opium, may have been coming from either Afghanistan, probably back then.
Well, probably,
maybe not, because the Taliban was shutting it down. I've been Turkey and
96 is when the Taliban started fucking up that program a little bit. Yeah. So it depends. It still could have been. I mean, look, they still didn't control. The Northern Alliance still controlled a good third of that country. So who knows? They produce 83% of the world's opium. So
yeah,
exactly. So you start reading this stuff and you're like, wow, okay, so these wars are not really what you think they're about. And I was studying a lot of CIA, like William Blum's books were incredible. He did a few books about the various CIA operations of the U.S. Rigging elections abroad, overthrowing governments, arming rebels, and always the economic and political motivations. But they always sell it to the American people in this guise of, this is the freedom fighter, this is the good guy. It's like it's like WWE wrestling, right? Like it's the good guy and the bad guy. And it's like, no, man, you travel the world, you get it. It's so much more complicated. So I really didn't like the media from that point forward. I never trusted the media. Watching the roll up to the war with Iraq, I mean, it was just so predictable because if you learned your lesson from the Kosovo War, you would have seen Iraq was a lie, but most people just didn't learn the lesson. And then, it's like to the present day, it's a joke. Like people never, I guess they're just zombies. Like they'll never at this point learn their lesson that the media is not there to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
There are a few good journalists and they're usually the ones that are kind of outcast or, like the Glenn Greenwalds of the world, right? Who are, kicked out, basically leaving his own company, realizing that once you start getting, money involved, and money has an agenda, right? That's what the problem is. And it doesn't matter if the money's coming from the state, like it's BBC or something. Well, that's great. The money's coming from the state. That doesn't make it more honest or have more integrity. It's got to come from from at least more of a grassroots spirit of like, hey, we want to ask questions as authentic journalists and show all sides, as opposed to this bias thing that it's not even journalism anymore. You're right. In the beginning, it's just like they're just pundits or something, bloggers.
I think people, because so many, they've realized now that so many different small elements in government affect their lives. Sometime in the probably after World War II, when and the reason they understood it is because the media wouldn't shut the fuck up about the Red Scare shit. You know what I mean? Like we had an enemy and it made us a lot of money, right? We had two enemies, the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese, and it made us a fuck ton of money, right? In the 1940s. Less so in the 30s, but now the 50s are around. Marshall Plans and acts. Now we're spending money, right? We need a new enemy, right? And maybe it was we went through 3 phases of fighting communism in this country. The first one was basically deterrence. Like you would go fight little micro wars so they couldn't take over those countries, like Cuba and shit like that, right? And the second one was détente, which means a relaxing of whatever the fuck. And the third was rollback, and that's where Reagan just outspent them. Like this whole Star Wars program where he's shooting lasers around. None of that shit even ever happened.
Right.
That was an information operation campaign that we just, like the Russians thought we might have it. So they were like, fuck, we got to go do that too. And it could not be done. So they just spent all their money and went fucking broke. Shit like that's been going on forever. So people became, they became entranced by everything that's going on. And then there's a point where there's a social currency to knowing what's going on. Because if you don't, you're a fucking idiot. What do you mean you don't care who gets in office? Like, whatever the fuck. And I think at this point in American society, it's too frightening for them to not know. Like, I don't think they can divorce themselves from this bullshit anymore. And it's also too frightening to admit that the thing that's been telling you all this stuff all this time has been lying to you every single day. Yeah. Nobody will fight harder to protect a lie than somebody that's wasted their life believing it. Yeah. Believe that shit.
And I think, most people, including myself, not Dan is in the middle here, but pick a party based on 1 or 2 issues. I don't think it's more complex than that. So, a lot of people are content going through their day, working their job, and if 1 or 2 issues that affects their family or their life, or maybe their beliefs, religious or climate, whatever it's going to be, I think it comes down to about 2 issues per person to be like, all right, I'm going to pick this side versus the other side, and that's about it. Republican for me is pretty much financial. I'll be blunt about it, and that's about it, because I care about taking care of my family financially, and then everything else, that falls on that side, I'm like, there's things on both sides that I'm like, yes, this is right or this is wrong, but there isn't a party down the middle that's for all of them, and until there is that, his show is called The American Party, which would be that third party essentially. Until there is that, I think most people are just content going through their day, picking a side, knowing that one of those 2 issues that they believe in is how they're going to raise their family and affect their day-to-day lives. Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, I think actually it's interesting because to me, on this issue alone, I would have changed allegiance, but I obviously I was already there because I saw it was coming. But the issue of the vaccine mandates alone, I would say run from that party, because once you start mandating what people need to put into their bodies, especially when it comes to like medication, medicine, anything like this, I mean, forget all notions of sovereignty over self.
Yeah,
like that's it.
There's never been an organization or political side in the history of humanity that has been censoring what you can and can't say in public and telling you what to put in your body and what not to, that have been on the right side of history not once. Like that, This whole thing, fucking this goober Fauci, he got lit up by some dude the other day. It was hilarious. He's like, I'm not going to resign. Fuck those people. Basically like, all right, cool, dude. He doesn't care. And then the HHS guy, Rand Paul, tore his asshole completely out of his body and put it on top of his head like a sombrero and rode around the fucking room on a little pony. And made him watch the whole thing. I haven't seen somebody get destroyed on the Senate floor like that. I don't think ever.
No.
That's one of the worst, because he's like, There's dozens of studies, including the largest that's ever happened in human history, 2.5 million fucking people in Israel, that show that natural immunity is far better than any vaccine that you've produced so far. That isn't saying you shouldn't go get one if you need one.
Yeah, we're not anti-vaxxers.
No, but if you've already had it, there's no fucking reason to do that shit, and you're mandating children to go do it now. Are you fucking kidding me? That's not following science.
And let's be honest, like we said, like, you know, what do they say? There's more kids that have been killed in Chicago from gun violence than from COVID. I mean, it's insanity. So it's pure insanity.
If there's no medical explanation for it, if it's not actually science, then it's about the mandate. And that's the problem. People, we talked about it yesterday. Sage Steele said she didn't like the fact that Disney mandated she get the vaccine, but she did it anyway. She complied, and now they're mad at her for fucking, complying, I guess. I don't fucking know. Like, it's stupid.
Yeah.
So she's not even speaking out against. People will just, if you look at the Merriam-Webster definition for anti-vax, let's look it up right quick. Actually, can you guys look it up and put it on the screen?
Yeah, pop that up on the screen.
This one's pretty funny.
And while you do here, Sean, I'm gonna ask you, with the mandates that are going on, do you think that influences the upcoming elections in 2022?
We're going to live to 2022. Are people going to be able to make it? I mean, are they going to be functioning as individuals? Because you're looking at a hive. What's being created is a roboticized population. Like, there's no way you can tell me that this left agenda, where again, it mandates what goes into your head, into your mind, as far as what you're saying, censorship, right? This level of censorship, propaganda, and actual physical decision as to what goes into your body. How can you consider yourself an individual? How can you give yourself the right to vote? You can't even think for yourself. Can't function. I don't consider that a potential voter. I think it's a robot.
Yeah, that's nonsense. So Merriam-Webster, right? Pretty well known for saying what shit means.
Yeah, and it's and having the little black child.
They popped it up on the screen. Can you get rid of their ads, please, off of our screen, guys, so I can read the goddamn screen? Thank you. So here's the definition of anti-vaxxer according to Merriam-Webster, which is the most commonly used dictionary on earth: a person who opposes vaccination or laws that mandate vaccination.
Yeah.
Wrong. What the fuck is that? Are you fucking kidding me? This is 1984 bullshit. When you start manipulating what words mean, when private organizations like this start colluding with the government to manipulate language, to demonize one person because they will not follow the rules, then we're fucked.
And there's a soft air quote around the word rules, by the way.
We're fucked. This is actually probably the worst thing I've seen so far. That they're changing. I mean, look, the CDC changed what immunity meant in September of this past year. Fine. That's a government organization that can be fixed down the road if it needs to be, or whatever the fuck. That's a partisan issue controlled by the executive branch. You should expect them to lie to you. I don't expect the people who say what words mean to be colluding with the government.
Yeah.
To demonize an entire half of the country, man. And not demonize them because they don't agree with them politically. It's because you can't mandate me to do shit. Fuck you. It's fucking incredible.
Sean, is that why you got out, like, all together? And are you going back? Are you going back to Hollywood for acting, directing, any of it? Are you just done with it altogether?
I don't look. It's interesting because there's a conception of Hollywood that was created by the media machine, right? And that goes back to really like the 20s and 30s. Really, that's when the stars existed, right? And you could say there's still a few stars, like a handful of stars, but they're pretty much older. There's no beauty in that kind of glamour that used to exist of that culture. I think people at this point are pretty much just like they're shaken up by the weirdness, the things that have come out about the pedophilia, the things that are just like, how do you say, the overall, it's like AOC wearing that, tax the rich dress to the Met Gala. That's pretty much, that's the way I think a lot of people are aware of what Hollywood means at this point. It doesn't have to be meaningful because we're in an era when content and create, TV series are more are more influential and more popular than films, right? They're being made all over the world. You can literally, production is in, places like Atlanta and New Orleans and, outside of LA.
Podcasts. Look, podcasts have taken over everything. And
exactly. It's decentralized is my point. So and I kind of grew up with that feeling anyway, because my dad was not really making most of his movies in LA. I mean, his movies we were shooting in Asia, we were shooting in Texas, we were shooting in, Louisiana. I mean, we literally Morocco, and we were all over the world with his productions. So that's why I always kind of laugh when people talk about like Hollywood, because like, yes, there was this sort of local centralized power that was created really at the birth of Hollywood. Mm-hmm. But I've just seen it kind of like there's an illusion of it to this day. But as far as like the actual creation of content and forward thinking, Hollywood was not necessarily like at the forefront of creativity, even going back to like a lot of the 60s and 70s time period. A lot of the, the filmmakers like the Scorseses and others that were coming up, it was like coming out of New York. It was a lot of it was independent. Again, even my father was an independent filmmaker who in a way got to work with the studios, but always was independent minded. So I don't see this control apparatus out of LA and Hollywood the same way that some people would like to think it is. It doesn't have to be going forward. I really see like you said, the podcast, the decentralization of being able to make a movie on our phones, on our little 5D cameras or whatnot. We don't need Hollywood in a sense. And they want you to believe it. The same as the Facebooks and YouTubes and others want you to believe, oh, you need us. No, you're just a platform. Yeah. That platform falls. We're the creators. We are the ones that are actually bringing the content, and we can do it anywhere.
Yeah, and by the way, I 100% agree. As a Hollywood guy, I remember 2014 or 15, whenever it is, I made the decision with my wife to move out of LA after doing 30 something movies or whatever it was. I got a lot of shit from my friends of like, hey dude, we miss you making comedies and all this other stuff, and I was like, you try to explain to people who aren't in Los Angeles. I was like, I don't think you understand. They're just not making comedies anymore. Like you can't get anything passed anymore. Everything is censored. Any joke that might offend someone is gone.
Oh
and then as the years have gone by, because I told everybody, I think, I'm switching mediums and I'm going into podcasting. To this day, I mean, dude, some of my friends are just dumbfounded, and then it just switched like overnight, it felt like. And everybody was like, yo, dude, congratulations, man. You made it. Your show's number 3 in the world or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of what I told you, 6 or 7 years ago, and now it is all different, and it is changed, and it is a creator economy that you can do everywhere. And I'm with you in the sense that like Hollywood is now just an idea. It is there, and the stars that are still left, and when I say stars, I'm talking like the A-listers, are
Will
older.
Smith, Tom Cruise.
Yes, but they're older. You're looking at,
I ask that
that's
all
what
the
I'm
time.
saying.
Yeah.
They're all over 40.
I ask
all
that,
of them.
I ask that all the time. So in the fucking 1980s, Cruise and Will Smith, they were in their fucking teens and 20s, right?
Yeah.
They were coming up. The 90s, you had DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Affleck, all these guys.
Pitt, and Clooney.
And Clooney. And then the 2000s, you had fucking famous actors that were young still. But now, who are the young, famous actors that are young?
Dude, so I had this conversation with a friend of mine.
Like, can you name one sub-30 actor right now that you'd be like, that dude's probably going to win an Oscar one day? Because I can't, off the top of my head.
I can't either. And like, I just got this question on somebody else's podcast. Somebody asked me this, and I said, I think the last one that I can remember, in all sincerity, was Colin Farrell, where that was the last young actor that everybody was like, oh, shit. Or what's his nuts? There's 2. He's doing Venom now.
Tom Hardy's great.
Tom Hardy.
Yeah, but he's 40.
Hardy, Fassbender, but they're older too. But
yeah,
the
Fassbender's
thing is,
40.
Correct. And so is Farrell. Like we're all, that was the last crop.
Well, so we actually saw it with Farrell because we worked with him on Alexander, right? He was the star of Alexander. So what happened was, in the old days, they would take like the studio system, right? Like they created like Cary Grant and Clark Gable and others. Like they would basically take an actor and like give him like supporting roles, right? And like little and they would kind of like give him like smaller films and like let him like become like the leading man and like get his chops going, right? So like by his like 10th movie, he's doing Gone with the Wind. Like that was kind of how they would groom these guys.
Yes.
Once you basically the studio system died by 2001. It was basically like it was transitioned I see the studio system in the classic sense of having producers and like people that knew storytelling running the show to basically having like Comcast, Comcast or AOL or whatever it is,
AT&T,
Verizon or whatever,
yeah.
AT&T start to like come in there. These studios became tech companies. They became internet phone tech conglomerates, right?
Yep.
It was about the bottom line. It was about CGI. Like, forget about the script writing. Let's just make a CGI fest. And then simultaneously you had this whole like fascination with like foreign sales. So it's like, let's not worry about the production. Let's just, get like a name actor, sell the hell out of the movie. Nick Cage is a great example, right? Bruce Willis. How many movies now you see like Travolta and you're like, man, that movie, they made it for $2 million, and $1.5 million of it is in Travolta's bank. I'm not being mean to Travolta. I'm just saying like they're basically
it's
like putting all the money
true,
into the actor's bank and putting nothing into the movie. So that started happening. So people like Farrell came up at the end of that whole like that studio system, right? And he's like, he's a hot young actor, and they put him in Alexander, and he was the lead role. And what happens with Alexander doesn't make a big splash in America. Like
right.
it does pretty well internationally, but doesn't make like, $150, $200 million in America. So Farrell his career got hurt because they're like, oh, you can't carry a movie, which is really what this is always about. It was just the idea of that. And it's not just him, by the way. It's like, he's a very talented actor. And some of those guys you said, like under 30, they are very talented actors. You'll see them on TV shows, but are you going to go to a movie theater to see that guy in a movie? No, you didn't care. You're like, oh, okay, maybe I'll go see it if it's a cool
superhero
movie, but it's not.
Right?
If it's like it's just like it's not like the old days where like, oh, Tom Cruise is not, I'm going to go see it because I know it's going to be like, because I love seeing Tom Cruise in a movie. It's a different mindset now. It's like, I'm going to sit at home, watch my TV series. I love that actor, but I'm not going to go out to a theater to see him in a movie. Yeah, it's a totally different game.
It is. And
but how many actors are like that outside of just action though? Like how many dramatic actors? Because you'll see them rise and fall over the years. Adrian Brody, I think he's won one and not been nominated another time. So he's one guy.
But then he just disappeared.
Yeah, then he just disappears. So I think that's what makes Daniel Day-Lewis's career so crazy. That he's just popped up and doing dramatic roles every single time.
And then he announced his retirement of hey, I'm done. This next one's my last movie.
Every single time. What is I think 33% of his lead acting roles, or 31%, he's been nominated for or won an Oscar for it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I just don't
Meryl
see
Streep.
that.
Yeah.
Some of the top young actors right now, Timothy Chalamet.
Yes.
You have no idea who that is.
I do actually. He's in the new Doom movie, and
he's a great actor.
The only reason I know him, by the way, is because of an SNL sketch where they just kept saying his name over and over again. Timothy Chalamet, but that's it.
Yeah.
Because he was in a movie, it was a homosexual movie with Armie Hammer, I believe, and that was kind of like his break or whatever. But
I can't remember what it's called. They call me by something or something.
Call me by your name.
Yeah.
That's it. There you go. Yeah. I knew Bob would know it.
Yeah, Bob knows it. He's got the poster on his fucking bedroom wall.
But that movie made $8 in the box office. Like that movie made $8.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So Tom Holland's another guy, but his success has come because he was in the
Marvel.
Avengers. Yep. That's it.
Yep.
Zac Efron also fucking. He's not a great actor though. He's just a good looking dude.
Yeah.
Now he's doing fucking reality TV now, right?
Yeah.
He's not even acting.
He did a doc series for Netflix.
Liam Hemsworth is famous because he's a Hemsworth, and that's really it. Let's be real. I mean, he's not the best actor. I think the one that's the best is probably Nicholas.
Well, he was
Hoult.
married to Miley Cyrus.
Yeah, well, no one cares about that.
No, but that's how I found out who he was.
I think Nicholas Hoult is the best actor among the young generation. He's the dude that played Beast in the new X-Men movies.
And you know what I know him as?
No.
Being Jennifer. God damn it,
Lawrence.
Yep. That was her boyfriend.
Yeah.
During that whole period of time, that's how I found out who he was.
He's a really good actor, but he's got two things going against him. One, British.
Yeah.
And no one gives a fuck about that unless you're playing James Bond, right? Which is a whole other conversation. Who should be the next Bond?
Yeah.
I think that's a good one to have. I always wanted it to be Idris Elba, but he's like 65 years old now. He's not going to be Stringer Bell from The Wire again. That's who I imagine Stringer Bell from The Wire, but as James Bond.
Yeah.
Just fucking murdering people. That would have been a great thing, but it's too late for him now. People are floating Tom Hardy too. But I don't know.
Would be great.
I don't know if I could see Tom Hardy as Bond though.
Yeah.
He's better in his own character. Just the best things he's done, like Taboo, The Jewish guy that he plays on Peaky Blinders, that gritty shit. I don't know if you can put him in a Bond. Bond's like fucking, it's very cookie cutter stuff.
Bond is going to be a trans person of color.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
No, they're going to get that.
That's what Bond's
They're
going to
get that shark from the last Suicide Squad movie, and that's going to be James Bond moving forward. He's interspecies, intersex.
Yeah,
He's got all the
exactly.
parts. Well, he's got 2 of each, as a matter of fact.
And by the way, piggybacking off what you said about Hollywood and the conglomerates, I remember driving through to go to auditions in the Valley and all that other stuff, and it was NBC for me that was the eye opener, right? Because it started off as NBC, and then the sign kept changing, NBC Universal. Then it was NBC Universal Time Warner, and then it was AT&T NBC Universal Time Warner. And I was like, Jesus Christ,
Look,
man, there's not enough space on the building anymore.
The longer the names get, what you should be looking for is when they start to shorten again, because that's when the real power is concentrated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Once it goes from AT&T, Time Warner, blah, 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 down to just U.S. government, that's when we have a fucking problem.
Well, we're close. And Sean, I want to ask you about that. Being a Hollywood guy and making films and documentaries and everything else that you do, I feel like we're headed towards what Dan is saying, where it's just going to be these one-word names that are left here in about 5 years. Apple, Amazon, and Netflix.
Yeah, it's going to be.
geez.
It's going to be.
I mean, for real, like everybody's merging.
It's going to be telephone and computer. They're not going to have brand names anymore. It'll just be generic. That's how the fucking corporatism and socialism work together. What we're seeing, everybody want. I keep saying this, but I want people to fucking investigate. This is not Marxism, and it is not fascism. It is a combination of these two things, like you've been seeing in China for the last 35 or 40 years since Mao died. That's what's happening here right now. Pay the fuck attention.
Yeah. And with you, like,
Yes.
didn't you just get censored or thrown off of YouTube? Are you gone from there? What's the real story with that?
Yeah, YouTube took my page down for a video that I had uploaded, but hadn't even posted it publicly. I'd scheduled it, and I actually was like, you know what? They're probably going to not like this because we talk about vaccines, so you can't talk about vaccines. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this. And when I went to edit it, they were like, "We have shut down your whole page. You are no longer welcome in the community."
What do you do for something like that? Are you allowed to write back and appeal? What is the process of it? Because I don't know too many people who've been banned.
Yeah, you appeal, but there's a bunch of bots, man. I mean, they've even announced it, right? That they're cracking down on the anti-vaxxers or anyone that questions the vaccine. And, it's like, it's just craziness. I don't even care. Honestly, YouTube, I mean, I don't care, to be honest. I don't really like these platforms because, like you said, they're too powerful in a sense. The consolidation of power is a major aspect of this globalization scheme. There was a study done by the Swiss back in like 2012 time period, 2013. I reference it, I think, in the New World Order book, and it basically was studying how like 1,000 interlocking corporations control almost half of the world's wealth, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like that's what globalism has done. It has moved it in such a way that only global corporations can maintain supply chains, right? That do manufacturing and production from China or Vietnam to deliver in the United States, right? You can't do that if you're a small local or mid-sized company. And that's why so much of the war has been about at one level expanding the power of the global corporations. And then obviously the last year alone, we've seen, with the lockdowns and whatnot, how many small businesses and mid-sized businesses were affected, because essentially we know that the war of the oligarchs, you can call them the oligarchs, the New World Order ideologues, is to basically, and even Klaus Schwab is a great example of it, the head of the World Economic Forum, right? It's like to take the power away from the individual and to put us all subject to global corporations, with the state as sort of the intermediary that's at one level helping to mandate and helping to facilitate these corporations to become bigger and more powerful, and then mandate you out of existence if you want to try to compete with them. So it's like you use the left hand as like free choice, buy Nike or Reebok, and the right hand is like, and if you try to keep your store open when we say to shut it down, we're going to break you. I mean, that's how they do it. It's left right. It's essentially it's a left right how do you say, both sides working the same ultimate angle. And that's why so much corporate money is in the political system. It's in you name it. Both the DNC and the RNC are sponsored by the same major global corporations.
The pharmaceutical industry primarily.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
What you're saying is exactly what I was alluding to before. It's two false choices, making sure they do enough to convince people they actually have a choice. That's really what it is. It's magician's patter. It's nonsense. This is all nonsense. It goes on at higher and lower levels, both locally, statewide, federally, and even globally all the time. So the Democrats are doing it right now with private business, like what you're talking about. And we've been talking about that for a year and a half. So you can't pass a law that says you have to get a vaccine. But what you can do is tell OSHA, which you control from the executive branch, to make these regulations. Now, I don't know what the difference between a regulation and a law is if both end up with me in prison or fucking fined or out of a job. Because it seems like the same goddamn thing to me. But during the Tea Party era, the fucking Republicans did this shit to the post office. They passed a bill that required the post office fund its retirement plan 75 years in advance. That means people that weren't born at the time had their retirements funded already. And then they ran around running for office on the fact that the post office is insolvent and we need to fucking make it a private organization now.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's fucking stupid. All of this stuff is stupid. Now the Democrats are doing the same thing with basically every private and public institution. This is where it's getting scary because the right tries to do their corporate shit, the left tries to do their government shit, but when they start colluding towards the same end, then we're really fucked. So they're making work prohibitive and less profitable, right? It's less profitable than just taking a government handout. People aren't going back to work because they're getting paid to do nothing, right? They're keeping healthcare workers from working so they can fully take over that industry. They're firing police, firefighters, EMTs, all these people. Soldiers are at least threatening to get dishonorable discharges for not getting the vaccine. They're gerrymandering all of these institutions that we depend on, right? So that we will have to depend on them.
Yep. And it's going to continue to happen. And my question to you, Sean, is how do we break this cycle?
When you say cycle, I hear psycho.
Yeah, either way, either one. Look,
how do we break the cycle?
How do you break this never-ending cycle of shit that we're currently in? Because this is the question that I struggle with.
It's dangerous. You know what these people are doing. I look at it like they are basically trying to put everyone into a Agenda 21 type of scenario or World Economic Forum type of scenario where you're basically going to be concentrated in cities and living off of government support or some kind of universal income strategy, right? You're going to own nothing. You're going to be a renter. That's very much where they want to move us towards. So how do we get away from it? Well, get away from those places first of all. If their power is concentrated in certain cities or whatnot, well, we may have to get away from those cities or those states and go to places where freedom is honored. And it's just like, it's almost like the U.S. versus Russia. The USSR wasn't beaten by America because we dropped nuclear bombs on them. It's because we basically proved that the capitalist way of life was more appealing and freedom is preferable to slavery, right? Like that's how it won. So if we can preserve certain states and we can preserve an economy and start to actually, and again, it's boycott, why should you be opposed to like forced vaccine mandates from companies? Then you should boycott them. Say, I'm not going to do business with you. I'm not going to want to work with you if that's your attitude, it's your ideology, right? I want to work. It's like South Africa during apartheid. Like we boycotted them. That's one way of actually affecting change. And then you do economy with people of similar values, right? Of like-mindedness, and that's why I say states are so important in this. America has the principle of states' rights that has been often that was in many ways checked by the Civil War, and people have kind of forgotten it since the Civil War. It's like, oh, states' rights leads to slavery. It's like, no, not inherently. That was just a bad economic model. But the power of states' rights, which is enshrined in our Bill of Rights, which most people don't even know because they've surrendered so many of them. But it's like if we can get back to this notion of states' rights and go to the states where we can have an economy that we allow to exchange in a more free model, in a way to then empower ourselves with like-minded individuals who are freedom-loving, I see a way forward for us, because ultimately totalitarian systems, they will crumble upon themselves or they will lead to as I say, a roboticized society, because you can't force slavery on humans. The only way you can achieve the slavery that these people are trying to achieve is if you roboticize the human. There's no way you can actually keep human beings subjected to the levels of enslavement that they're talking about, as far as not owning anything, basically just being dependent upon the state corporate nexus of power, eating what they tell you, putting in your body what they tell you. I mean, that doesn't work for a human being. That only works for a robot.
Yeah, I feel like I've had a conversation with two Dans today. You guys agree on almost everything. We got about 16 shows on this network. If you'd like one here, let us know. This has been a fun interview today, all the way around. You have a series that is out now. Tell everybody about it.
Yeah, best kept secret. So it's a docuseries that I started this year with Robert David Steele. I'm not sure if you guys know him. He was a former CIA officer who was very outspoken in the conspiracy world for quite a few years. He passed away. He was our executive producer. He passed away right when we were about to launch this thing, right? So this is definitely in memoriam of Robert. And the series is, it's like, for me, it's a 6-step red pill into how you are controlled. And I say you as far as like, especially the American, but it's an overall, it's a global elite. And so we get into aspects of pedophilia in politics. And, essentially we look at the Franklin scandal as a great example. That's the case from the 80s, of how basically politicians and business leaders in Nebraska, but also, in DC as well, were trafficking these kids and protected by the FBI and the Justice Department, by the deep state apparatus. And then that really that foreshadows the Epstein story in many ways, right? Because Epstein is so connected to major Wall Street players like Leon Black and major politicos like the Clintons, obviously, and he himself, Epstein, was a major donor to the Democratic Party. So we get into the Epstein story as an example of political compromise and how you compromise politicians using this illicit thing, right? Like pedophilia. But then we also get into the aspects of mind control and how we know MK Ultra programs have existed since the end of World War II, but at least they existed for a few decades. But how did it get operational? How did it become operational and weaponized against not just individuals, but against the whole population? So the red pill journey is really for anyone who doesn't understand how the elite control our society through a mixture of mind control, ritual abuse, and then actually transhumanism, which is the ultimate agenda of where we're going with this whole donut shot. I call it the donut shot, right? It's like get a free donut. The scheme is to ultimately, they've genetically modified your environment, the crops that you eat, the genetic modification of our crops, the chemicalization of our fertilizers and pesticides and things like this, the whole Monsanto, creation of seeds and you name it, right? The Roundups and the glyphosate in the Roundup that is toxic to humans. Like, they've already done this to all of our surroundings. Why are we surprised to see that they are now wanting to do it to the next step, which is to genetically modify and control the human being? That's where the agenda is leading towards. And so we get into even the interdimensional side of it, which is spiritual beliefs in demons, and whether or not people subscribe to it. That certainly is there. Ideologically, there is something to be said for satanic belief systems within the elite. And we get into those in the later chapters.
And where is this available at for the audience?
It is on Vimeo on demand. It's on iconic.com, David Icke's website, and it's on 107daily.com.
Nice. Vimeo's got the best quality in the biz, I will say that. This is the point in the show we get to the Drinkin' Bro of the Week. Who would you like to give the Drinkin' Bro of the Week to as someone who has inspired you or helped you become the person you are today?
Oh, wow. I didn't even know about this part. Well, I mean, look, I always have to, give a shout out to my father, certainly for inspiration, right? Mm-hmm. That's certainly, he certainly has been an inspiration to me and helped me to see the world in a more eccentric way, but I think in a more honest way, looking for truth, looking to try to figure out, how power works, how our reality is shaped and formed. His courage to tell the truth, even when it's unpopular, and loses friends and it alienates people, but it takes an integrity to do that work. So I would give it to him.
Look, a lot of people do give it to their father, and I think, eventually most of us do become our father in the end, and I know that that's a popular quote, except for Dan's case.
Yeah, my dad's a cunt.
Yeah, but but for a lot of us, that certainly holds true. Sean, thank you for being here today. You're a fascinating guy, man, and I wish you the best.
I appreciate that. Thank you, guys. Really, it's a lot of fun.
Thank you. For Sean Stone, D'Anthony Holloway, I am Ross Patterson. This is the Drinkin' Bros podcast. Good night, everyone.